Thank you and good morning everybody. The Australia-China Business Council is one of the preeminent bodies in Australia now dealing with the bilateral relationship, and it's quite significant that last week we were successful in a networking day in Canberra in getting not only the Prime Minister, the Foreign Minister, the Trade Minister, the Resources Minister and several other ministers plus the opposition leader to come and talk to our members. And I think the Australia-China Business Council can play a very important role in influencing government. And as Laurie just mentioned, one of our recommendations for the white paper has already been adopted, so we're hoping that the other ones are going to be given serious consideration as well. The Australia-China Business Council covers a wide diversity of businesses in Australia, from the producers of the large red rocks and the large black rocks that make a lot of money in our current export trade with China, through to SMEs who are running very successful businesses in China, and ACBC seeks to support all those businesses. This seminar today is, in my view, very, very important. I strongly believe that as Australia looks on to the next phase of its relationship with China, in this 40th year since we first recognised China, that we have to really work hard, as Laurie said, to broaden and deepen our relationships. There are sectors such as education, which is going to be a focus here today. For a number of years, we relied on the inflow of young foreign students, particularly students from China, who comprise the largest number, to bolster that sector of our economy, a very, very important sector. But China is moving rapidly and we must keep up with it, and we must think laterally as how to maintain and build our relationships. China is very quickly developing world-class universities and business colleges. And I suspect that in 10 to 15 years' time, China will easily have universities of the quality of the Ivy League universities, and there'll be opportunities for young Chinese to stay in China, to do their business studies, to be lectured by the best and brightest academics from the University of New South Wales, UTS, Harvard, Stanford, Yale. And the original market that we developed will change dramatically, and I think we have to think ahead. One of the great concerns that I have sometimes in listening to many speeches about China is most of those speeches are underpinned with extraordinary statistics about iron ore and coal. And there's no doubt, we're very lucky. We're in the right place at the right time with an increasingly wealthy country that needs our resources. But we have to be very cautious. There's a number of older faces in the room who remember our relationship with Japan. And it was very much where we are with China. Japan was going to take our iron ore and take our coal, and that was going to go on forever. And it was going to underpin the Australian economy. Well, sadly, the Japanese economy has gone into recession and stagnation. And more importantly, the economic relationship between Australia and Japan has not flourished. And it's not because of any major ruction between Australia and Japan. It's a relationship that, sadly, I think for both Australian and Japanese interests, died a bit from neglect and from complacency. And I think with China, as we look beyond tomorrow, I think we have to really make sure that complacency doesn't come into play, that we don't believe that the Rio Tintos and the BHPs are going to control that relationship, that we really do focus on broadening and diversifying the relationship into the services area and strengthen what we're doing in the services area. As Laurie says, there are great challenges in the services area. Whilst people can debate whether you need the best free trade or the most comprehensive free trade agreement, we need a free trade agreement with China. It is quite inconsistent for Australian law firms to go to China and pretend they're business consultants without getting a Chinese licence. We cannot lecture the Chinese about the rule of law if we have professional service firms operating outside the legal framework in China. It would cause great reputational damage to King & Wood Mallisons or even my own law firm Hunt & Hunt if we're unlawfully operating in that jurisdiction. And in the services area, we need that freeing up of the free trade under a free trade arrangement. to be able to work much more effectively with our Chinese counterparts up there. I think that there's huge opportunities as long as we remember that whilst we are riding the Chinese dragon, as I've said a number of times this year, we have to remember we're not on the head or shoulders of the dragon. We're actually on the tail in terms of where we fit in the Chinese context. Sometimes we overstate our importance, and we have to be careful. We've got tremendous competition up there. Even in the resources area where we think we're the best in the world, there's a lot of Brazilians in Beijing who are working very hard to cut into our marketplace. And there's a number of other countries who are doing a good job there. They're encouraging Chinese investment in their own country. They're working hard on cooperative ventures. We need to do the same thing. And we also need to be a bit more open-minded in this country on issues such as we've seen in the press concerning Huawei in recent days. If we are serious about a two-way relationship and arguing with the Chinese we want them to open up their markets, we must do likewise. And it's quite inconsistent for this country to take a view that a major global Chinese company that's been allowed to work in a number of jurisdictions around the world, including New Zealand, including in Europe, should not be allowed to bid competitively for an infrastructure project in Australia. Huawei has done a lot of hard work to integrate itself into Australia. In fact, it's one of the exemplars of a Chinese business coming to Australia. And yet we take that very narrow view of the past. The media misreports the issue of state-owned enterprises, and we need to open our minds, and we need to be more flexible, and we need to be more understanding about these issues. We need to work with our Chinese colleagues. We also need to remember that once upon a time Qantas was a state-owned enterprise, Telstra was a state-owned enterprise, the Commonwealth Bank just up the road was a state-owned enterprise. There is nothing intrinsically wrong with state-owned enterprises, but as I say, Huawei is not. And that's why I find it quite extraordinary and inconsistent, the rhetoric that we've got out of our media. I think this morning's seminar is very timely and very useful. The Australia-China Business Council thoroughly supports the growth and diversity of relationships with China, and I think, as Laurie Pearcey said, we need to be China ready. We need to have an open mind. One of the interesting things about China, they publish their 12th five-year plan, so we can actually read the aims and aspirations of the Chinese government in a whole range of areas. We can see their economic plan. We should be looking at that document carefully. We should be looking at where there are opportunities for Australian business and particularly the services sector. Thank you very much.